Hello, everybody. This is Tuesday in my meditation for Holy Week for the second day that we've been doing this during the Holy Week. I want to talk to you about an event in Jesus' life when he was interrogated in the temple. Now, the temple played a very pivotal role in the life of Jesus. At 8 days old, his parents dedicated him there and had him circumcised according to the Jewish law and the custom. 8 days old. A 12-year-old Jesus, when he was a 12-year-old boy, he was there in the temple also. He took refuge there while he was separated from his parents. And while he was there, he asked precocious questions to the elders who were amazed at his cleverness. At the height of his ministry, Jesus entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday riding on a donkey, and the crowds were ecstatic. And Jesus' first act was to enter the temple, and there he caused a ruckus by overturning the tables of the money changers, spilling coins everywhere. He drove out the merchants that had set up booths in the temple to sell doves and other small animals for sacrifice for the Passover. His was a calculated public demonstration to protest the abuse to which he had seen the religious leaders allow the temple to fall. And of course, the pandemonium alerted the religious leaders, chief priests, the temple staff, their theologians, and their Bible scholars that this provocateur was stirring up mayhem among the people and should be stopped. Just nip this uprising in the bud. Someone needs to do something about it and to put a stop to this young rabble-rouser, Jesus. Each day Jesus would enter the temple freely, though. As though he owned it, he continued to teach the people who gathered, and they would hang on to his every word. He told incisive parables that just thinly veiled a message of God's judgment against those who abuse God's way in God's temple. But his detractors were ever present, interrupting to grill Jesus as they could. They tried every trick in the book to produce an embarrassing gotcha moment and catch Jesus in his words. So they confronted Jesus to interrogate his action and expose his motives. First, they questioned his authority. Who gave you the authority to do these kind of things? Who do you think you are, coming into the temple and stopping the business that we've got running there? But Jesus, with a little mental jujitsu, turned the tables on them and put the question to them, a question that they dare not answer. Okay, I'll answer your question if you'll first answer mine. John's baptism, by what authority did he get that, from heaven or from earth? You answer that and I'll tell you by whose authority I do these things. Well, that sort of shut him up. Jesus parried every inquiry with a clever question. He could discern their motives. They were trying to entrap him with a question, but he turned the questions on them. They were not seeking truth or seeking to understand better, and Jesus knew that. Their next question concerned taxes. They thought they could put Jesus in an awkward situation, a kind of catch-22, that he would be damned if he did and damned if he didn't approve of the paying taxes to Caesar. And you know how Jesus evaded that trap too. The third question was one that interested me the most. It was one sect within the temple hierarchy, mostly among the priestly caste, that were called the Sadducees. They also wanted Jesus to just go away. They sent their representatives to question Jesus on a theological theme. And that question interested me the most because it concerned the resurrection of the dead. And since we're approaching Easter, wherein we celebrate the raising of Jesus from the dead, God raising Jesus from the dead, I want to focus for a moment on this question. Let me read a portion of it, of this story, in Matthew 22, 23 through 28. The same day, the Sadducees, who deny that there is a resurrection, came to Jesus. They asked, "Teacher, Moses said if a man who doesn't have children dies, his brother must marry his wife to produce children for the brother. Now there were 7 brothers among us. The first one married and then died, and because he had no children, he left his widow to his brother. The same thing happened with the second brother, and the third, and in fact with all 7 brothers. Finally, the woman died. At the resurrection, which of the 7 brothers will be her husband? They were all married to her." It may help to know that Judaism was not monolithic in its belief systems, not back then and not today. In fact, Judaism and Christianity and Islam, three major Abrahamic faiths, all contain a broad spectrum of beliefs, of stated doctrines on different themes, different matters. And by the way, just let me make a little caveat here. Faith is not the same as holding beliefs. Doctrines, beliefs, are putting our beliefs, our convictions about things into words to clarify what we think is real and true. Doctrines are intellectual constructs. We humans are driven to organize our thoughts. Anselm of Canterbury, who was a theologian in England in the 11th century, spoke of theology as faith seeking understanding. Faith seeking understanding. But doctrines, though helpful, are not the same as the self-commitment of trust and loyalty that we call faith. People may have faith but still hold many fallacious beliefs. Maybe they still have a basic trust in God. And God we can never completely grasp and understand. All of our doctrines fall short. I believed many things about God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit and the Bible that I was taught as a child. That as I grew and on more mature reflection, I've changed some of those beliefs over the years. Many Jews of Jesus' day and even today did not believe that there is life beyond this life. The Pharisees that we hear often encountering Jesus, in fact, Nicodemus was one of the Pharisees that believed in Jesus. The Pharisees believed in resurrection of the dead. That was part of what they taught as their doctrine. But the sect that they called the Sadducees did not believe in it. They thought that we live our lives on this earth, faithful or unfaithful to God, and when you're dead, you're dead. They questioned Jesus by setting up an absurd situation of an unlucky woman who married 7 times, each time to one of the brothers of her first husband. And their clinching question was, at the resurrection, which of the 7 brothers will be her husband? They were all married to her. It sounds like a good question. They hoped to stump Jesus or perhaps to get him on their side of the debate with the Pharisees because they had hot debates about these things. I love Jesus' answer that's recorded in Matthew 23, 29, and 30. Let me read it to you. Jesus responded, "You are wrong because you don't know either the scriptures or God's power. At the resurrection, people won't marry, nor will they be given in marriage. Instead, they'll be like the angels of God." Jesus taught us something true about the resurrection existence. Jesus clearly took a side on this issue. He believed there is one. He flatly countered their belief in no resurrection. He said, "You're wrong because you don't know the scriptures or God's power." That's quite an embarrassing rebuke for people who prided themselves on being biblical. But Jesus corrected that kind of crass literalism when he said, at the resurrection, people won't marry, nor will they be given in marriage. Instead, they will be like angels from God. In other words, marriage as we understand it is for this world, not the world to come. This coupling of people in response to that human drive to unite and to become one, to satisfy human loneliness and fulfill the need and desire to experience deep communion with someone like ourselves and yet different, and the blessing of producing offspring and welcoming that little human being into a community of love. These are needs that fit our present state. They occur on this earth to human beings in the world this side of death. Marriage is in this worldly reality, and it relates to life here and now in this realm and under these conditions. But resurrection that Jesus was referring to and the world to come, though like this world in many ways, is also different. It's of a higher dimension than life as we know it and experience it now, if we are to believe Jesus. Resurrection life bears continuity with life as we know it, There's some things that must be the same. We must maintain our own personality of some sort. But it also holds discontinuity. It is life of a higher order, a higher dimension. I don't know how else to explain it. This in no way is less interesting or some diminished form of existence. It is described as glory, of power, of freedom, heightened and intensified and completed and fulfilled. The world to come is not a dreary existence of eternal boredom floating on a cloud playing a harp for endless ages. I mean, what a lame image that some people have of heaven and the world to come. Now, sometimes I wish that Jesus would have just given us a little more information, but apparently that wasn't his aim. He negated the claims of the Sadducees that thought they had him when they set up this bogus hypothetical situation of a woman having married 7 times, 7 brothers, and to whom would she be married in the afterlife? How would he solve that riddle? But Jesus simply stated that we will be exalted beings like angels, pure spirits, unencumbered by many of the limitations of this world that we presently experience. Intimacy will not be confined to marriage. But there's more to Jesus' answer. The Sadducees believed that doctrines could only be affirmed if they derived from the Torah, that is, the first 5 books of their Bible that they attributed to Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They would take all of their doctrines only if it was in those 5 books. That was their central core canon of Scripture. According to them, Genesis through Deuteronomy, the Torah, their claim was that it did not clearly teach a resurrection of the dead. But once again, Jesus pulled a little jujitsu by citing a passage from the Torah to correct their wrong belief. Jesus referenced a Bible story with which they were all familiar, a very fundamental story. He quoted a text from Exodus 3, where God spoke to Moses from the burning bush, the very call of Moses into his ministry to liberate Israel from Egypt. Listen to these words from Exodus, how Jesus quoted it. As for the resurrection of the dead, Jesus said, haven't you read what God told you? I'm the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He isn't the God of the dead, but of the living. Wow. That was in Matthew 22, 31 through 33. And he was quoting Exodus 3 and 6 and verses 15 and 16. Exodus 3, 6, and 15 and 16. He was using one of their most familiar Bible stories, the call of Moses when he was on holy ground before the burning bush, right before God was calling him, and said, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. Apparently, they had never entertained the thought that God was referring to living beings present with God. Jesus indicated that this was no litany of the past dead people, but were people very much alive. And it's interesting, in Luke's account of the same story of this questioning, he adds a little sentence in his account. Luke puts it this way: He isn't the God of the dead, but of the living. To him, they are all alive. Isn't that amazing? To God, all are alive. I've presided over many funerals. I've done so with the confidence that we can entrust our loved ones to the God who cares for us and loves us more than we love ourselves. We can entrust our loved one to God's safekeeping, that they will be with the Lord. To God, all are alive. Jesus himself said these words in John's Gospel: Do not let your hearts be troubled. Do you believe in God? Now believe in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I am going to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I'll come again to take you to be with me, so that where I am, there you also may be. And then he said, because I live, you shall live also. This life, according to Jesus, is not all that there is. The Apostle Paul, basing his understanding on the resurrection of Jesus and the promises of Jesus, He wrote these words to the Corinthians, Christians living in Corinth in the middle of the first century. He says, "So we are always confident, knowing that while we're at home in the body, we're absent from the Lord, for we walk by faith and not by sight. We are confident, yes, and well pleased rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord." To be absent from this body is to be present with the Lord. As we prepare for Easter, let us know that God is not the God of the dead, of a litany of the past dead, but of the living, for to God all are alive. Jesus also said these words, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, though they die, yet shall they live, and whoever lives and believes in me never dies." And he ended with a question, do you believe this? Can you believe this? Do you want to believe this? Amen.